Maryjane Reilly from Relate Family Therapy. I'm so glad you're here with us today. And you can tell us a little bit about your services, and then we're going to get into how you help families with co-parent coaching. So first, if you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Relate Family Therapy, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. Like she said, my name is Maryjane. I'm one of the licensed clinicians at Relate Family Therapy. I also provide co-parent coaching. But at Relate Family Therapy, we're a really in-depth one-stop shop for therapeutic services. We see the full lifespan. So as young as 3 years old, all the way through end-of-life care. We have a variety of different therapists that do a bunch of different things, from play therapy, family therapy, couples work, individual therapy, of course. And in doing so much of this systemic work, what we found was this really important need for a service that we called co-parent coaching. And it was really developed out of my own experience clinically working so much with children going through divorce and then their parents, and it's really the same type of client, right? And what I saw over and over and over, and as well as other clinicians, we noticed that parents so desperately want to be a good parent and so desperately want to take care of their family really well, and oftentimes don't have the right tools, or they get so mixed up within litigation or complexity with through divorce or separation. And so what we developed was this specific service that's different than the therapeutic space, but it really has a lot of information from psychology and from background and family systems work to find like a really effective protocol. Like, how do we get parents onto the same page so that as they transition into a new version of family, they feel regulated and supported and clear on their expectations of themselves and their co-parent. And we found it to be really, really helpful. So we're really excited about this service we've been providing for a while now. It's been really, really wonderful.
That sounds fantastic, because that is so difficult for couples, especially if they do have some kind of a serious litigation process that's contentious. There's a lot of hurt. The communication is bad. So can you give us a little preview? Like, how does this process, is it a certain process you go through, and do they meet individually and then together? Tell us a little bit about how it works.
Yeah, thanks for asking. Absolutely. So it developed a 12-session protocol. Basically, it's really procedural in the sense that we start with each co-parent, each parent individually gets their own session to start. So there's a true intake and assessment of like, where are we at? What are the things that you feel concerned about? What's the history within the relationship? Because that obviously informs what type of conflict is going on. And in that initial individual session, each person gets one. We really are able to assess what kind of co-parenting we're approaching, whether it be cooperative, which is hopefully the goal of working together and being able to work as a unit, or like high conflict, conflicted co-parenting is most typically where we start, and even like parallel parenting. So really different varieties of what our baseline is. And after that first initial few sessions, then we continue on into like the psychoeducation section. And so that really looks like attachment and development and communication skills, and looking at how do we have more helpful, more healthy resolved conflict in real time when it's like, a very complicated person that you're co-parenting with, this person that oftentimes can be incredibly, a tension-filled relationship. How do we work through some of those things just through getting information about why someone might feel that way, to be able to change the pattern that's been going on. So we do a good chunk of psychoeducation and understanding child development, attachment work, like I said, and then as well as like the person of the parent. And so from developing that baseline of information, then we move into like another individual session where each parent gets to figure out like, okay, what are they bringing with them? What's the baggage that they're carrying into the space that we need to work through and kind of sift through together. And then really session 7, we're on to the child-focused approach. And so what I've developed around that is gathering a ton of material from other co-parenting worksheets, information, resources to develop a basic set of what I call like the outline or the rules. It's not a parenting plan, but you can utilize and integrate the parenting plan that's already been done if there's one already. But it goes through these really specific, very practical, very helpful, what I find to be the most stuck points for parents typically. So the example I always give is like, yeah, Joey needs to get to soccer. Let's figure out how to get Joey to soccer without it being stressful for mom, dad, parent, Joey, anyone. How can we get you into a place where Joey just goes to soccer and we don't have to think about it twice? And it's been really successful in the fact that parents have been able to empathize with one another and really understand the basis of how a child-focused approach and child-focused co-parenting is the best co-parenting for the parents too. It is really, yeah, it's really fun. And so from there, we start to kind of titrate out. So we do our basic outline and agreement on rules, contracts, what that looks like. And then we check in a few weeks later. If things are going positively, we check in a month later. If not, then we add some session in and figure out where the hiccups are and how to resolve them. And from there, we tend to find a lot of success. And just even having another route, having some coping skills, having agreed upon language is a big part of the work that starts off. So it's really where we end up developing. And then if needed, sometimes people can choose to do individual therapy, or I've seen even cases where family therapy becomes part of the equation, which is pretty wonderful. Yeah, so that's really typically what the process looks like.
You know, and it sounds awesome. I mean, I think to myself, wow, that is just the coolest thing, but you have to have two people that want to do it. And I think you probably, do you get court ordered stuff? Like they come to you, oh my gosh, the judge said we had to do this. And then if one person doesn't participate, I mean, they gotta sue them. I mean, you like take them to court or whatever, they're not participating. But how do you guys do, how would that work? Does it really, you know, you've ever been successful making one of those parents actually make some changes?
Yeah, good question. I mean, it's definitely tricky when both people aren't on board or don't have the same ultimate goal, really. And one of the pieces that we name, and it's in our initial first step, is there's a letter of an outline of expectations of what people can expect from the co-parent coaching route, like those 12 sessions. And there's an agreement that both parties need to make, that they understand what the basic outline is and what the goal is. And so that's our first step that we take to make sure that everyone has the same information, as we saw that to be a big wound for people going into this process of like, yeah, sometimes it's court ordered. And how do we find a way to make it worth your time being court ordered? In my own like therapeutic background, I worked a ton with court ordered clients and in different facilities and such. And so that's a population I'm totally comfortable with. I think where we go really clearly, we don't offer any specific parenting time or any opinion on parenting time, but we oftentimes will work together with whatever team and unit and really systemically to get these parents really what they want, which is a better, healthier relationship with their child. So we're good at finding a way to build rapport typically, but sometimes it can be a challenge for sure.
Yeah, but I just think it's amazing because we all know, and people that are watching this video know, that there's always this court-ordered parenting class that people need to go through to get their divorce. But boy, this to me sounds like it would even be way, I mean, improvement if they could do a co-parenting, because so many people, like, they get through the divorce, they've been amicable, they did all the right things, yay, we got through it, and then things kind of fall apart later and they end up having so much trouble, even though, like, just so you know, with our parenting plans that we do at Garske Divorce Mediation, we put so much effort into having a very clear plan, like who's picking up from soccer, how is Joey getting to soccer, how are we going to do that? Because we don't want the texting, and we really encourage our clients to have a plan so they're not overly communicating. That can sometimes, you know, be used for you or against you or all of that. So we try to get a really concise plan. But so do you ever see, like, I don't even know, how would the courts ever change to maybe add this? I mean, do you guys advocate for that? Are there places out there that would advocate for that change?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, like you said, I think it is a really helpful service. What I've seen in the clients I've worked with is that it is really effective, and it is really so deeply focused on the thing that parents want out of parenting class. And it's so uniquely designed for the couple, for the group that is working through this, which I really find to be so helpful compared to other maybe more general classes. This is a specified service. Like you said, for your parenting plan, we're looking at Joey's needs. We're not looking at some child in general's needs. We're looking at this family's needs and this particular like co-parenting group, why their breakdown is happening and what they need. And so I find it to be so effective. And I definitely think it would be an incredibly helpful service. And I mean, what I appreciate the most about what we developed is it's useful for other relationships. I think that's the biggest wonderful positive feedback I've gotten, especially from like typically the male clients I've worked with. It's like, oh, this was so helpful for me asking for a promotion. This was so helpful for me using assertive communication with my son or with my friend, and these really, really practical life skills that I think oftentimes can generally be taught in maybe those parenting classes. This is a more specified version, and it's more intentional to look at the role of the parent rather than just like general parenting advice, which is good and helpful, has its place. But I am totally in agreement. I hope that it moves towards necessity, because I find it to be really helpful for the kids too.
That's the kid. Yeah, we all want to protect the kids and give them the best foundation they can. And when their parents are not in the same home, they can still have a family and have a great feeling and sense of support from everybody if everyone's on the same page.
Yeah. One of the things I really love to name, one of the things I've been thinking about a lot with the co-parent coaching is, how do we keep the child as part of the system and not the binder of the system? So they're not the reason why we're still a family, right? Typically a couple breaks up, they go their separate ways. Their life paths take very different routes, not always guaranteed that they interact, except for if they have a child. That's the guarantee, right? And so how do we keep that child not actively the middle, not actively the pawn?
Right.
And even if parents are so intentional, it just oftentimes just kind of falls that way. It can be kind of tricky to navigate. And I think with this background and the way we've developed this program, it has been really effective to be a child-focused approach to prevent that binding, being the child and more so being the parents, getting to create a system that is new and evolved and different than what it had been, because they'll still be a family. It'll just change in what it looks like.
Exactly. And just having the parents be the ones who are driving the bus rather than the child feeling all the power, because they can go and throw their weight around and they're just not mature enough and old enough to be able to do any of that. And so if the parents can be the ones guiding and leading, oh, it's so much better. But I know that doesn't always happen. And that's why I'm so glad that you offered this service. I know that we'll promote this through our advertising and stuff like that, because it's something I don't think people even know about, that it exists. It seems kind of a new area, but I'm just so grateful. Can you tell us a little bit about, like, how would we get in touch with you if someone's listening to this and they're like, oh, I want to look into this? Tell us about your website. Who does your intake? Tell us about all that.
Wonderful. Yeah, thanks so much. RelateFamilyTherapy.com has a ton of information. It has like the basics of what the different services we provide, but co-parent coaching, especially under like the telehealth. So currently all of the co-parent coaching I do over Zoom. I find it to be most effective, and I find most people to be more open to it. It's just helpful. It's like another version of a barrier of boundary, especially as we're rebuilding connection and relationship. So that's just for a heads up for everyone. But RelateFamilyTherapy.com is the most effective way. There's an inquiry form where it says speak to a therapist. It should be under there. Otherwise, the Relate phone number is 303-954-9809. Any of those routes are great to get a hold of us. Everything funnels in through me. I'm the referral coordinator as well. And so in that, I get to really do the first assessment and make sure that the parents this is the right fit for what their needs are. And in there, then we begin the intake process. And like I said, each person gets their own intake, and we do the group intake together after that to make sure everybody's on the same page, has the same information. It is a very no secrets policy type of work. It's a really helpful, different tool than therapy. It's a really practical tool.
Sounds like coaching versus therapy, because we know that's different. There was one last thing. So can you tell us a little bit about cost? I mean, is it something that they buy like a package, or they just see how many they need? Or tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll let you go.
Thanks so much. So typically the sessions are $160 a session. It's an out-of-pocket cost since we can't bill insurance. It's not due to medical necessity. And so from there, it looks like a guarantee of the 12 steps. As I mentioned, like that first initial really letter that we send out and make sure that everybody has an agreement of the terms. It names specifically the price and the agreement to 12 sessions. There's no requirement of paying all 12 sessions straight up front. There's been a few cases where we haven't needed all 12 sessions. They've resolved things pretty quickly. The shortest amount of sessions I've seen is 8. And so in there, right, like the more willingness there is to work together and collaborate effectively, the more willing we are to make an adjustment to the process. But typically it's $160 a session. 12 sessions are required to agree to, and then we can always make an assessment as we need.
Awesome. And just once a week? They just go once a week for like an hour? Or?
Yep, exactly. So once a week, 55-ish minute sessions. If we can, there's been, of course, many situations where it's hard to schedule with 3 people. So we find a way to make that work. I have some evening times and some Saturday morning times available coming up here, especially in late August. There should be some more afternoon, evening times too. But it's just an hour long. And then it's a pretty easy session if you're willing to do a little bit of work. Not a ton of homework, just a little if needed. But it's fun. I like to have fun. So I find a way to make it a little bit lighter. It's not quite as intense as you'd think, probably.
Right, because the coaching is like not so digging down like a therapy thing, and it doesn't seem as
Totally.
scary. Like I can learn some tips, and it should be so doable. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think knowledge is power, right? If you know how to respond to your child that's freaking out, it feels really good. It feels really good to be that type of parent. And I
We
think,
all do that. Yeah, we all can
right,
do that. Yeah.
right. And I think what I have loved to witness the most in really, really powerful ways is a couple that could not co-parent well together, really, really struggled, a ton of tension. Every time they saw each other, there was aggression or lying or, crying, some really intense emotion. And where we got to this last week actually is that mom was telling dad how great of a parent he was and how she had seen his growth and she had seen his development. Their child had named it too. Like, dad really showed up for me this week. And watching mom verbally say, "You were a really great dad this week. And I'm
Oh,
so
that
glad
makes
we're
me
working
proud too.
together."
Yeah,
I know.
yeah, I
It was
bet.
amazing. It's amazing. And I think what I see is everybody feels good in it. And I think when there's so much tension and litigation and complexity around these things, and you do such a beautiful job of this in your work that we've talked about, like how do we remain in our humanity and how do we remain as people as not just numbers and not just, in response of competition, looking at like if the kid wins, everybody wins. And so keeping child focused is so important for the co-parenting work that we do. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I can tell you love what you do, Mary Jane.
Yeah.
You tell you
Thanks. I do. Yeah.
awesome. Well, we'd love to have your firm back and tell a little bit more about other services that you have. But thank you for sharing about the co-parenting today.
Of course. Thank you so much for your time, Leslie. Thank you.